Welcome to the Books That Make the World Better podcast. I'm your host, Jennifer Browdy, and I'm so happy to have with me today Hilary Giovale, the author of a beautiful book called Becoming a Good Relative, Calling White Settlers Toward Truth, Healing, and Repair. So welcome, Hilary. So glad
Thank
to have
you
you
so
here.
much, Jennifer. Thank you for having me today.
Yeah, so the book came out in 2024.
hmm
And I gather that you were writing it for quite a while. It emerged as a whole process, and you document the process in the book. So I'm wondering if maybe you could start by telling us a little bit about how you were called to write the book.
Yeah, sure, I'd be happy to. It's kind of an interesting story because I never aspired to write a book. I never wanted to, I never even really thought of myself as a writer. But in the at the end of 2015, I had some events happen that sparked this process for me. And it was kind of initiated by finding out that I descend from early settlers in the United States. On my father's side, they came from the Scottish Highlands in 1739. And on my mother's side, they came even earlier from German-speaking areas in the 1600s to Pennsylvania. And so I found that out. I also found out that on my father's side, some of my ancestors enslaved people. And that created this massive identity crisis and spiritual crisis for me. And so I was at that time, and before and since, and continuing to this day, I always go to the forest when I have to sort something out, when I'm working through something personally. So I went to the forest and I started hearing this whisper in the trees about, you need to write a book. You need to write a book. And I was terrified. I had no idea how to begin writing a book or even to write at all. And and so I reached out to a friend of mine, Yeye Louisa Tish, who is an African American elder, and she did a Dilagoon reading for me, which is part of her spiritual tradition. And in that reading, the ancestors came through and said, she has already written this book and she's just in the way of it coming into reality. The book has already been written and she just needs to get out of the way. And so Yeye Tish, who is also an author of multiple books, gave me some writing prompts and, was very loving but firm that I needed to get started. And so I think it was having that accountability from someone I really respect that encouraged me to just start. And that's how it began. And I remember actually the very first pieces of this book were written on a flight I was taking to France for the ceremonies for human reunion that were organized by Dene Elder Pat McCabe.
Mhm.
And so that's also very, when I look back now, I think, gosh, I was actually heading to like the motherland of my people when the first words were written. And that's meaningful to me too. So it's
Mm.
been quite a process.
Yeah. And so you mentioned even earlier, right, going on a Pachamama Alliance trip
That's right.
and
Yep.
and being told that you needed to be part of the new dreaming a new dream, right?
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Yes.
So tell us about that.
Yeah, that for anyone who's not familiar with the Pachamama Alliance, they formed in the 90s, and they are a partnership between Indigenous peoples in the Amazon region of Ecuador and people in the quote unquote modern world up in, the United States, Canada, etc. And part of that partnership was a mandate early on from the indigenous leaders in South America that those of us in the North, in the modern world, need to change the dream of the modern world because this is a dream of disconnection, of exploitation, of extraction, of always having more and building more. And in their cosmology, dreams create reality. And so they gave this mandate. And so the Pachamama Alliance, since then, has been running educational programs and trips down to Ecuador, as well as programs elsewhere, in order to educate people and basically spark this process of changing the dream of the modern world. So when I first heard that mandate and went down to Ecuador, I believe I went in 2012, and I went with my daughter who was 9, and it captured my imagination because it was such a even that assignment is so far outside the paradigm of how we think of things
Hmm.
in this culture. So I just began thinking about it and being curious about it and wondering, like, what would that mean? What would that look like? How would I do that? And that became a really kind of central guiding inquiry for my book that I
Right.
return to over and over.
Right. Now, the Pachamama Alliance was co-founded by Lynn Twist. I don't know if you
That's right.
mentioned Lynn Twist in your book, but has she been influential for you?
Yes, yes. Actually, I did some work with Lynn back in, I think it was also in 2012. I did some coaching with her. I had read her book, The Soul of Money, and was just blown away by the understanding she expresses in that book. And I became very curious. And so she has been one of my teachers.
Yeah, I would think so.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in this book, I mean, you have the word white settlers in the title, right?
That's
And you're
right.
kind of you're going into territory that might make white people uncomfortable, white Americans. Anyway,
Yes.
yeah. So I think in many ways, I feel like you're very brave in this book, and you took on a task that most of us are just afraid to even touch, you know. And so you talk
Yeah.
about what do you call it? Amnesia or denial? Certainly denial about the reality of how this country was founded and who created it, who white settlers were, and that these are our ancestors now. So this is complicated, and it's all wrapped up actually in money, right? Money is,
Hmm.
yeah, land, money. So maybe you could just talk a little bit about how you made your way into this territory and what you learned along the way.
Yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely. You know, it is, I was so terrified to write this book.
I
I was
believe
terrified
it.
the whole time. The whole time it was being written, I was terrified. I would, every few months, I would kind of go into this panic about what am I doing here? I'm talking about the most taboo topics, all of them at the same time,
Yes.
right? And like, there's a great fear. I had a great fear for a long time of being ostracized and not saying things correctly and just being canceled for talking about these things, right?
Mhm.
And because that's what we kind of do right now. And especially a few years ago, I feel like it was worse a few years ago.
Mhm.
And at the same time, I felt that I had been given an assignment by my ancestors because things happened and rolled out in such a way that I couldn't ignore. It wasn't being manufactured by my mind. It wasn't a curiosity that I had ever held or worked with prior to my early 40s.
Mhm.
I things started happening, books started jumping out at me from the shelves and furniture fell over and dreams came and all of these synchronistic events and relationships and people showed up. And I took all of that as signs that I was supposed to be doing something. And
Mhm.
I felt like if I ignore this assignment, that's not going to be good either. And so I think, a big part of my healing after I first learned that I had ancestors who had colonized and enslaved was this process of learning to come clean about that. First, I came clean with people who I love and who love me and who are, people of color, Indigenous people and other communities of color coming from those communities. And then gradually I started being able to speak about it more broadly. And the thing that was so shocking to me was that I was actually met with love, kindness, compassion, and
Mm,
encouragement. I was met with people saying to me, "Good. Thank you for saying this. Thank you for standing up and acknowledging who you come from, and keep going. Keep going now. Don't stop. Don't look away. Don't forget about it. Don't put it on pause. Keep
mm,
going." And so I pretty soon it evolved from an ancestral assignment and mandate into an assignment that was being held by a community surrounding me. And I ended up having over 60 readers provide feedback,
mm,
which was also very uncomfortable,
mhm,
you
mhm,
know? But also, I knew that I couldn't publicly talk about these things without having a lot of input from people I really trust in order to give me that honest, critique and adapt as needed. And so it really became a life consuming project, and
mm,
it still is. It's still,
mhm,
even though the book has been published now for about a year and a half, it that process continues. So
mhm,
it's been very interesting. It's taught me a lot.
mhm. Did the early readers give you feedback that made you change direction or
Oh
change things
yes,
or yeah?
yes,
Can you give an
yes. I
example?
had so many drafts. I can't even count how many drafts I had. You know?
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's a complicated book.
yeah,
I was sort of reading it a little bit with my editor's eye and thinking,
right.
boy, this is a complicated one.
Yes,
It weaves in so many different stories and angles and modes of inquiry, and it's just so.
yeah,
Kudos
yeah.
to you for pulling it off.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I know it is complex,
Hmm.
and especially for someone who doesn't think of herself as being a writer.
Hmm. Hmm.
So, so yeah, it was a big
Yeah.
learning curve.
And I felt like part of it was just your own story. And a memoir is my thing. So, of course, I'm very interested in that. And then part of it was you reading a lot of different sources and sharing what you're discovering, reading and talking to and experiencing different things, and then sharing those sort of to encourage other people to maybe try some of this too. Was that part of your motivation?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. It was both to encourage people to try some of it themselves and also to share because
Yeah.
in the beginning it was so hard for me to figure out how to plug into the authors and the communities and the teachers who are teaching this kind of material. And it took me years. And
Hmm.
so once I finally figured out that network and how to connect and what books to read and what classes to take, I really wanted to empower that sharing that information with others.
Hmm.
And then I also it was really important for me to meticulously document where I was getting my information
Hmm.
because that is part of building credibility. And it's really important for me to trace everything I've read and where I'm getting this stuff because I want this book to contribute to a body of literature that is being written. It's already, there have already been many books published in this genre, and now there are starting to be more and more. And I want us to build a foundation collectively that can be credible
Hmm.
for people to basically change the dream of the modern world and have the resources and the understanding they need in order to do that. And so that it's not out there floating in space and not grounded and things like that.
Hmm.
So I have heard feedback since it was published from many people that they appreciate it's almost in some ways it almost serves like a reference book.
Hmm.
because it has such an extensive bibliography.
Yes. Yeah. I really
Yeah.
appreciate that. I mean, in some ways, it's like you did a PhD dissertation all by yourself
Yes,
without
that's right.
the yeah.
It is like that.
Yes, it is in of a PhD program that doesn't really exist
Yes,
yet.
that's right.
Yeah. So I appreciate that. And it's true that there are many people working on various facets of what you're talking about, but I don't know if there are that many who put it together coming from the white settler point of view the way you do, you know?
Yeah,
Yeah. But
that's true.
because there just haven't been that many people willing to take the risk of going there. Yeah.
Yes.
So let's just talk a little bit about why this is so risky. I mean, what are
Hmm.
what are the stakes here?
Yeah. Well, um, as white settlers, and I can add too that the very last reader who contributed to the book, at that time, it did not have a subtitle. It just was called Becoming a Good Relative. And she said to me, I want you to put a subtitle on here stating exactly who this is for
Mm.
and what the purpose is. And so
Mhm.
that's how the subtitle came into being. And I'm really grateful for her for making that suggestion because um, it is hard. It is hard for many of us to even read the word white about ourselves, much less the word settler. I find that adding the word settler ups the ante even more
Mhm.
because it forces us to acknowledge that we are living in an ongoing system of settler colonialism. That colonialism is not over and done with, that we are actually still living through ongoing oppression that has its roots back with our ancestors in history, and that's hard for us to acknowledge. And I think that's in part because whiteness socializes us to be very much in denial about that, very much, it's a thing of the past. It's not something that we should feel guilty about. And honestly, it's not something we should really even think about at all.
Mhm.
And so we have been largely, I mean, I can't make blanket statements for everybody, but a lot of us have been, raised and acculturated in that way of just looking the other way, pretending it didn't happen, pretending it's not still going on. And it can shake our sense of identity and our sense of security when we start looking at it. And
Mhm.
so that's why it's so hard. And one of the things I'm really super grateful for is that I was invited into a process of sitting on the land for multiple days and fasting. It was a ceremony, an Indigenous fasting ceremony I was invited to participate in. And that fasting ceremony helped me build a different identity than the one I had been brought up with and had been rehearsing for the first 40 years of my life,
Hmm.
you know? And so that's what, from my perspective, that's what we need to do. We need to learn how to build different identities that aren't just based in whiteness.
Right. And do we have to do 4-day vision fasts? Is that the
No,
way?
I don't think so. I mean, a lot of people do now. I'm
Mhm.
starting to hear that more and more, that people are developing their own ways of doing that because it's very important not to be culturally appropriative.
Mhm.
Um, so some people are drawn in that direction, and other people, there are lots of different ways to do it. But one thing I've heard over and over from many of the elders I work with is that the core practice that all of us need to be doing is connecting with the land. Whatever that looks like, whatever shape that takes, could be different for each of us, but I hear that all the time. I hear that from elders across all different cultures and backgrounds. And so I really take
Mhm.
that to heart.
Mhm. Yeah. So you describe yourself as a spiritual orphan at
Yep.
one point, and then
Hmm.
sort of as if you were adopted by a mountain,
Yes, that's
right?
right. That's
Yeah.
right.
Can you
Yeah.
talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I feel very blessed. Where I live, where I'm sitting right now, is at the foot of a sacred mountain of kinship, and she is over my right shoulder right now. Her name is Doko Oslid in the Dene language, and she's known as the San Francisco Peaks in English. And she is sacred to all the nations of this region. So that's, Hopi, Dene, Havasupai, Apache, some Pueblo groups, and others. And she is a being of kinship.
Mm,
She's known to be a grandmother, and she carries the medicine of love. And so I have lived here at her feet for over 30 years, and I didn't understand anything about this when I moved here. I was completely ignorant to the idea of sacred landscape.
hmm,
But as Indigenous friends have told me, this mountain works on everybody who lives nearby, whether we are aware or not. And so when I look back now, I think she has been working on me ever since I was 18 years old and moved here as a college freshman. And and she has imbued in me a sense of wanting to be accountable to the community, to her too. I mean,
mhm.
I really look at her now as my elder, my grandmother, and my teacher too, because I've spent so much time sitting in her forest and listening to her and making offerings to her and asking how I can support her. And so it's quite unique to be brought into a relationship like that with a place, and I'm just incredibly grateful.
And just say where is the place? Like what is the state you're in?
Right. Well, this is now colonially known as Flagstaff, Arizona.
Arizona. Okay.
Yeah. Hmm.
Somehow I thought maybe you were in New Mexico, but no.
Right. Yeah. I'm in Flagstaff.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, there's this saying, we're all indigenous to some place, right? But for settlers, for American settlers, a lot of us have been cut off from our ancestral connections to the land. And so I think it's encouraging and reassuring to hear how you've been able to develop a connection to this land and that we can do that and that we don't have to feel guilty about doing that. Like the land is receptive to these
Yes.
connections. Yeah.
Yes. I know a lot of times in these kind of decolonial circles, it's a conversation that happens a lot. Like, as settlers, is it okay for us to do that? Maybe we shouldn't be doing that at all, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I understand that point of view too, that we do need to be careful. We need to be very we can't just go about willy-nilly claiming space. So we don't want to replicate a colonial mindset when we are building relationship. And so we need to tread carefully. And at the same time, a lot of the people who have taught me have really said, you are a child of earth. We all are. We are all children of this sacred Mother Earth.
Mm-hmm.
And all of us need to reroot and reground and reestablish our connection with her waters, her plants, her stones, her soil, her mountains, etc., in order to create the changes that are needed for life to continue here. Because we are all in serious jeopardy now
Yeah.
with what has happened for the last several hundred years and more. And we really need to change our way of being in relation to her.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah.
So part of the change, when I have a book called Purposeful Memoir as a Path to a Thriving Future.
Oh,
When
awesome.
when I work with memoirists, I'm interested in having people look back in order to understand the present more fully so they can step more intentionally into the future that we all
Right.
desire, a thriving future. So it seems like that's the path that you've been on in many
Yeah.
ways. And that first step, the looking backward and coming to terms with ancestry, has been a really key step. And I think it maybe it's certainly for environmental activists, it can be an easy one to just forget about and not bother with and just be all focused on present and future. But I
That's
feel
right.
like you need to do that deep work of reconciliation and understanding in order
That's
to
right.
move forward effectively. Yes. So talk about that, about your work with your ancestors and
Yeah. Well, prior to this process starting in 2015, I didn't ever really have a concept of ancestors being relevant or serving any kind of role in current life.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
And and these concepts were introduced to me by a variety of people over a few years. And eventually I ended up just kind of experimentally building an ancestor altar in my house. So it's in the corner of my dining room in a little alcove that's there, and it has a rocking chair that was passed down through my family that I rocked my babies in and my mother rocked me in. It has a little table. It's very simple. It has, a candle and a bowl for water, and it has a few other things, but it's very simple. And I started working with that ancestor altar and trying to contact them, asking them to help me, lighting candles, putting herbs or flowers there to honor them, making little offerings like cups of coffee and plates of food. And over time, I went from feeling like, oh my gosh, I'm pretending this is just like not doing anything at all. And this is really strange. I went from that to when I sit there now, years into this practice, I feel them.
mm,
I feel them surrounding me. It's like they've been given a place to land, both physically in that part of the house as well as in my consciousness and in my DNA. It's like they've woken up and they're with me. I know that they're walking with me. And
mm,
and that I think is important because it is our ancestors who took the steps that got us to where we are now. Both the amazing parts, the fact that we're all alive and walking around in bodies, and that they
mm-hmm,
gave us that.
mm-hmm,
They gave us their ingenuity, their strength, their wisdom. And also, we inherited some stuff that's really problematic. And
mm-hmm,
so it's working with the both and of that and asking them to help us advance the next chapter of the family story. That's how I've come to see it now, is like while we're alive, we each have an opportunity to write a chapter
hmm,
that builds on the previous chapters,
mm-hmm,
but that advances the story. And
mm-hmm,
so, what story do we, how do we want our chapter to be? What kind of
mm-hmm,
story do we want to tell in that chapter?
mm-hmm,
And for me, I want my chapter to be about healing and looking at the past in order to bring forward a more equitable and sustainable future, and a future that can nourish our future generations and not just leave them stranded in a trash heap, you know?
yeah.
And so, yeah, that's really how I've come to see it. And that ancestor altar practice is very simple and incredibly profound at the same time.
Hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, have you done mediumship work or anything like that?
I never have.
No.
I'm starting to get a little bit curious about that. I'm curious to hear what they would say through
Mm-hmm,
someone else, but um, it's more of a felt sense I have that by intentionally connecting with them. And I've also had many dreams that are ancestral communications too.
mm-hmm,
That's
mm-hmm,
usually how I hear them.
mm-hmm. And dreams are a form of channeling, really.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you have a lot of dreams in the book, which I really appreciated. And also found, again, another one of these unusual things about your book that weaving in the dreams with the research, with, so many different discourses woven together. Um, so I'm curious, actually, I'm curious about how the book has landed. Like, what has been the reception of the book?
Right. Well, it's I think my greatest fear while I was writing it was that I would just be um really publicly critiqued and, canceled.
Mm,
And that has not happened at all, to my great surprise. There have been some reviews that have made clear that, this is not a book to be read alone. This is a book to be read in tandem with books by BIPOC authors, and I wholeheartedly agree.
hmm
Things like that. Um, but ultimately, it has just been really, really sweet because I've had a lot of people reaching out and telling me how much it means to them. I've heard a number of times a story of like, I opened this book and I didn't realize that this is the book I needed. And within the first few pages, I was in tears. I've
hmm
heard that story many times. And my intention as I was writing it and receiving all the feedback and rewriting over the years was like, this is not about me. Even though it's a memoir and
hmm
I used a lot of stories about me, ultimately it's not about me. And I really want this book to be a prayer that goes out into the world
hmm
and reaches those who are meant to read it, those who need it. And not everybody needs it, and that's okay, you
hmm
know? And so I have been unattached to like, book sales and things like that. And it's really just a prayer to support those of us who are ready to begin this kind of journey.
Mm. And have you found people,
Oh,
coming? You've
yes.
sort of found the tribe that needs the book? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I would say I have been teaching a lot. I've been teaching the material from the book for 6 years, and more since it's come out. And in those classes and those circles, it's really fascinating because it's taught me so much about what people go through when they begin working with this kind of material.
hmm
And you just learn so much from teaching. So I've really tried. I always co-teach with other people, and we work together to really support people in a loving and compassionate way because it is so tender to
Yes.
do this work. It takes so much courage, and so we
hmm
really try to show up for them, and make that safe container for them.
hmm hmm
Hmm.
Because there's a lot of trauma, right? Generational trauma that is getting released.
Hmm.
I
Yep,
think you use the term perpetrator trauma, right?
that's
I
right.
don't know if that is that your term or does that come from somewhere? I don't know.
Yes, there is a source. I cannot remember the name of the book right now. But there is a woman who wrote a book using that particular term. And another way to think of it is moral injury.
hmm
That's a more broad, universal term where we do sustain wounds from descending from these legacies that have never been addressed, you know? And
hmm
and now we're living through a time in this political climate where it's just, that settler colonial mind, that mind that created the systems of slavery as an economic system, are just, it's kind of like they've always been there, but now they are just on full display for the whole world to see. And it's shocking, although it shouldn't be. The only reason it's shocking is because it's been buried this whole time.
hmm
But it's also just it creates like a soul wound. That's a term from Eduardo Duran. He's an author. Um, it creates this a moral injury of like, oh, we are perpetuating these systems. We are benefiting from these systems. We are participating in this economy that's so unjust.
hmm
And how do we get off this roller coaster? So it creates that kind of ick. It creates a major ick factor once you begin looking at it. And I do think it's a form of trauma,
hmm
you know?
Mm-hmm.
I've also found in teaching classes that one of the main things that shows up that's kind of non-obvious, but once you start fleshing these conversations out with people, one of the things that shows up is sexual trauma in our families that has been passed down.
Mm-hmm.
And if you think about it, this is all about patriarchy. This is
Mm-hmm.
all about family secrets. It's all about power, power over children.
Mm-hmm.
And that is something that has surprised me as being tied in with these systems of colonialism and white supremacy and colonization. That is a major factor as well. And now, with the release of the Epstein files, what we've seen, that's there as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah. Well, there's sexual violence in the enslavement story for Black Americans and in the boarding school story for Indigenous Americans. And yeah, it's there.
right.
It's there. And it's never been addressed.
Mm-mm.
We had the Me Too movement, I think, while you were writing the book. Is that right? That came along.
That's
And
right.
also Black
Yeah.
Lives Matter
Mm-hmm.
surged. And as you mentioned a couple times, the cancel culture movement surged. And then it's almost like now we're in this backlash period of, the patriarchy striking back
Right.
big time. And I don't, where do you think it's going to go? Like, where are we? How is this cycle going to work itself out? I guess is what I'm wondering.
Right. Well, in my better moments, in my more optimistic moments, I think all of this stuff has to come out. All the dirty laundry has to be aired in
Mm-hmm.
order to create and galvanize the shift of consciousness and the shift of doing things massively differently, you know? So
Mm-hmm.
that's in my better moments, I think we are moving toward that. We are all of this ugliness and just violence and disgusting behavior is serving a purpose in the end. And so that's my hope, you know.
So
I
it's like
hope that we'll get there.
we're lancing a a,
Yes.
a boil. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm. So, but at the moment, um, yeah, I think I'm encouraged to hear that you're finding people attracted to the book and to doing this kind of work.
Hmm.
Um,
Yes.
because we're certainly not hearing about that in the news.
Oh no.
It's not on the surface at all.
No.
No.
And honestly, too, I'm part of a women's writing group. There are over 30 of us all writing on these topics.
Hmm.
Some of the books have already been published, some are kind of in the works, some are in the publishing pipeline, but many of us teach and facilitate. Um, we're all doing all different kinds of things, but it's all of our work is intersecting around these topics. And that gives me hope too, because there's a whole network of us, and we have networks that are spreading out from each of us that are all intersecting. And a lot of times I think of us as being like mycelial networks.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. We're not on the news. We're often not even visible on social media really. And yet there is this like growing network that is just getting stronger and stronger every day. And perhaps that's how it has to be because it has to come from the bottom up, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah,
And somebody has to be left to pick up the pieces when the big systems start crashing down. Yes.
exactly. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, so it would be that sort of grassroots mycelial kind of action that gives you hope these days.
I think so. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Even like, I'm observing as, you know, in various places, people are getting ready in case ice comes. And what does that preparation look like? It looks like building our interrelation,
Mm,
building kinship with each other, building networks of trust and relationship. And so, in some ways, I think, gosh, it's obviously so tragic what ICE has done to our communities and is terrorizing people all over this country. And at the same time, perhaps they are giving us the push we need to get stronger with each other, for each other. You see, like there have been so many incredible stories that have come out of Minnesota with, the relationships and the incredible just love that has been extended from neighbor to neighbor up there. And
Hmm.
so I, yeah, I think it does have the potential to awaken our capacity, what's happening now.
Hmm.
Even though I wish it weren't happening and I wish people were not being hurt by it. But it is, I don't know. I do see that happening.
It's a push that
Yes.
maybe we need. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I agree with you. I mean, because business as usual will just sort of
Right.
continue and continue and continue until there's a wrench thrown in that works.
Yes.
Yeah. So, and that's one of the things that's remarkable about your story is like, I'm not sure what the wrench was. I mean, somehow you received that push
Mm-hmm.
and ran with it in a way that is fairly unusual for people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's true. But also I can share too that even though I went through many years of working through this material by myself, largely by myself, it was very painful, it was hard. But now I've come out the other side and I have discovered this path of making personal reparations.
Hmm.
And that is incredibly joyful and healing. And that is the cure to the moral injury. And so I feel in some ways like even though it was unusual what I did, maybe I did it so that I could kind of light the path for others
Hmm.
and help show that it is possible to come work through this really hard material and come out the other side stronger and better and with more purpose than you ever had before,
Hmm.
and because that's been the case for me.
Hmm. Yeah. So talk about the what do you call it? Uh,
Personal
philanthropic,
reparations.
well, and philanthropic alchemy, and
Oh, right.
yeah, you have,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
Talk
Yeah.
about that.
So in this lifetime, I find myself, married into a family where I am able to do philanthropy and give money away. And that's one way of making personal reparations, which is very much needed. Wealth redistribution is very much needed.
Hmm.
When you look at the racial wealth gap and the ongoing economic oppression in this country, it's very necessary. And for those of us who are not in that position, it's also possible to do personal reparations of other kinds. And so I have worked with both, groups that are wealth adjacent or have, decision-making power over wealth and can give money philanthropically. And I've also worked with people who don't have that. And it really doesn't matter. In some ways, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how much you have to give. It's the act of giving
Mm.
and it's the act of repair, making intentional repair that is
Hmm.
healing, that is what's needed right now. And so I can share, I've got a Google Doc that's a guide to making a personal reparations plan. And I'll share that with you for the show notes. And anybody can do it. And it's incredibly healing. It provides a tremendous sense of purpose. And, in some ways, it can be the antidote to the just despair and malaise that is
Hmm.
so much a part of all of our experience right now. Um, so yeah, it can be a very uplifting thing to begin looking at.
Hmm.
Hmm.
I think you described a personal giveaway, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
that's right.
Is that part of like one of the things you can do?
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. I mean, I know a lot of times in various indigenous cultures, a lot of times once you've passed through a certain, portal or a certain achievement or a certain milestone, there will be a giveaway. And that is a beautiful practice that
Hmm.
I feel we could all safely do without appropriating. To go take a look at all of your favorite things and bring them all together, not just like the stuff that you want to haul off to Goodwill, but the stuff that you really love,
Hmm.
and lay it down on a blanket and invite everyone to a feast and give it away.
Hmm.
Imagine how our culture would change if a whole bunch of people just started doing that. The
Hmm.
generosity. And then I know after I did my giveaway ceremony, it's the craziest thing. People started showing up at my house with gifts for me. And I remember at one point, some Indigenous friends came over and they brought me these beautiful earrings. And I said, "This is really weird that you just came over with these earrings because I just did a giveaway ceremony." And they're like, "That's how it works.
Hmm.
These are part of the natural laws that when you give everything away, you will receive."
Right. So it's kind of a free circulation of wealth
Yes.
that's been bottled up and
Yes.
accumulated and held so tightly.
Yeah,
Yeah. And
that's right.
it feels like the planet herself would like the wealth to start circulating more freely again.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh. I
Yeah.
mean, that's her economy.
Hmm.
That's how she takes care of us,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Radical generosity
Exactly.
from Mother Earth. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the sun, you know,
Yeah.
uh, it's
Yeah,
free.
exactly.
The sun is
Like,
free for all of us.
what if we could learn to be more like them and
Hmm.
follow their example? I just think it would be a whole different reality if we would model ourselves after them.
Yes, absolutely. And there, that abundance, that sense of abundance, there's
Mhm.
enough.
Yep.
There is enough. It's just not being shared
Yeah, that's
properly.
right.
Yeah. So I know you mentioned land rematriation and land tax and how people get nervous about that, which
Yeah.
I think is true. In the West, the tribes are more visible, the reservations are more visible. In the New England, where I live, it's everybody's on this land and nobody thinks about it at all.
Mm,
That it was tribal land, and the land acknowledgement, perfunctory statements just really don't do it for me. Um,
yeah.
no, so I really appreciated that you propose strategies that seem like they're more based in the land, in reality. Yeah.
Right, right. Yeah, and actually, sometime in early April, I have a second edition coming out,
Mm,
and it has an expanded list of land tax programs, which I'm super excited about. There are
mm,
way more land tax programs than I knew initially, and probably more coming online all the time. And that is a really, to me, that is one of the key strategies for not only redistributing resources and wealth back to Indigenous communities, but also for shifting consciousness and, really enacting and living the reality that all of us are on Indigenous land. It is still Indigenous land
mm-hmm.
to
But so
this day, you
ex-
know?
explain what the land tax idea is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, they are usually, these organizations are usually led by Indigenous people, and they are, it's a way of returning resources to Indigenous people either on the place that you live or could be elsewhere. So, like, my daughter went to college in New York for a while. So I gave to what was once called Mannahatta Fund and is now called American Indian Community House. Um, my son spent some time up in Washington State. So I give to I think it's called Real Rent Duwamish. So you can give to them anywhere that you like.
Mm-hmm.
Or another way, if there is not a land tax where you live, you can select a BIPOC led organization and simply make a recurring monthly donation. Now, I spoke with a friend recently who said that she is a Mayflower descendant, and she only has $15 a month to give, but she gives monthly to the Wampanoag tribe
Mm,
because of her ancestors landing there. And she said, even though it is not a huge contribution, it still helps her to feel that she is contributing to the repair and the healing of that history by
mhm,
having a constant stream that's always going back to that group of people. And that's really beautiful. That
mm,
starts to shift our consciousness from the inside out when we do things like that.
mhm, mhm. So so the word tax is sort of a misnomer. It's not it is a donation. It's right.
Well, it's some call it a tax, some call it like an honor pledge. There are different words for it. I actually think that the word tax is used by some of them because it of its connotation, you know?
Hmm.
It
Hmm.
is like you are living on our land and you need to pay tax.
Hmm.
So, right?
Hmm.
So I remember the first time I heard that term, I got very triggered by it
Hmm.
because it bumped up against my entitlement, right? And so I had to work through that. Um, so some of them have different names, but ultimately for me, it is that. It is a tax. It is like I need to be in reciprocity with you because I'm living on your land. Or
Hmm.
I'm visiting your land, or I'm going on vacation on your land, or my children have been to your land, like that, you know?
Hmm.
So, so it is a contribution. It is a financial contribution that's voluntary,
Hmm.
but it is also helpful for me to think of it as a tax.
And it goes into funds that support the indigenous communities that you're donating to. Yeah.
Yes. Often it will be going to land back types of projects where it's about, purchasing a parcel of land or regaining leadership over a certain area of land, but it could go to anything that the community decides is of need,
Hmm.
and it's really up to them. And this is one of the important things about making personal reparations plan, contributing to land tax programs, etc., is that those of us who are contributing, we don't get to decide.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
that's by design because it's really important to return that decision-making power, not just the resources, but it's about power and the ability to be sovereign and make decisions
Hmm.
that are autonomous. So, yeah,
Hmm. Yeah, it's it's a big project. It really is, but it has to do with, I think part of what's happening is reweaving trust, you know?
that's right.
Yeah. So
Yes.
the moral injury you're talking about is a terrible destruction of trust that happened
Yeah.
historically and continues into the present with good reason, you know?
Yeah.
And and so to try to, at least in what one can do individually, personally, to reweave some trust
That's
back
right.
into that relationship. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
Um, I just want to read a line from your from the afterword that Lila June Johnston wrote. Um, she wrote, "We have worked to metabolize the grief buried in our DNA into a balm for broken souls. There's something beautiful to be made from these ashes." I thought that was really so beautiful. And it seems like
Mm.
that kind of encapsulates what you're trying to do with the book, right?
Yes, that's right. Yep.
Create a balm.
Yes, that's
Yeah.
right. And actually, I want to really recommend for listeners who are interested, Lila June has established a new school that's called Rehuman, and she's teaching incredible classes on all different kinds of topics with all kinds of Indigenous elders and experts. And they are phenomenal classes.
Hmm.
And, she's one of these people who is really all about making the indigenous knowledge that is not, culturally sensitive and meant to be private, but taking the fundamental indigenous knowledge that is able to be shared and sharing that broadly because it's this understanding that we all need to re-indigenize and reconnect with the land and each other. And so it's an incredibly generous and for me a very visionary move for her to do that. So I want to recommend her classes.
Maybe send me that link
I
also.
will.
I'll put it in
Yes,
the
I
show
will.
notes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So are you writing anything now? Are you still writing?
I occasionally write and I do have an article coming out at the end of this month, at the end of March, that is, a a more goes more in depth into the story of I actually have Indigenous ancestry too.
Hmm.
And so that used to be in the book, but it was too in depth to include. And so that article will be coming out at the end of the month, and I can share it with you too when it comes out.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I have not been writing that much. I hope to get back to it more. I've been so busy teaching that I haven't had much time to write, but I hope to return to it and, begin some new inspiration with that. So,
Yeah. As I was
yeah,
reading this book, I was thinking about um, that there might be more to write about the ancestors and their stories.
right.
Because I think the tendency has been to kind of demonize our ancestors who were so, who just did the wrong thing by our modern standards, right? They didn't live up to our ideals and what we wished, how we wished they could be. But you did a lot, even in broad strokes, to kind of rehumanize them and try to understand why they did what they did, and that would make a good story,
Oh,
you
thank
know.
you for telling me that. Because that's actually a passion of mine to like learn more about them and their ancient cultures. That's an ongoing research project for me that I'm very interested in. So maybe I will write more about that.
I think that would be great. Yeah,
Yeah.
to understand the white settlers just in a more holistic way. Yeah,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yep.
Hmm.
Right.
All right. Well, on that note, thank you so much. This has been a wonderful conversation.
Oh, thank you,
And
Jennifer. I appreciate being able to visit with you and all of your excellent questions too.
my pleasure. Thank you for listening to another inspiring episode of Books That Make the World Better.